Hi, folks. Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the phenomenon of politicians when they're in minority or in opposition. They're not in government, they're not in control of the committees. How tough they talk about how they're gonna fight back against this globalization thing. They're gonna stop the mass migration. They're gonna stop the illegal migration. They're gonna stop the arrival of illegal aliens. They're not going to have any of this activist nonsense in the universities and the schools. They're going to clean up the public service, and they're going to represent. They're going to listen to the people, and so on and so forth. So, yet the minute they get into government, they or into power or control of the committees, they do almost none of what they said they'd do, even the day before. And if anything, they amp up the pro-globalist policies of the previous administration. Now, it's even when you look at, say, the new Italian government of Giorgia Meloni and it's sort of like a right-wing centre-right coalition. I think every article that I saw from the mainstream media was far right, fascist, Nazi, far right, white supremacist, evil, Hitler, Mussolini, and so on. But they were talking about some fairly moderate things, stopping illegal aliens arriving and preventing the NGOs from ferrying these people from Africa into Europe. And they were talking about repatriating or expelling people who are in Italy illegally, and pretty sort of tame centrist type stuff. But they were condemned widely for this. Now they were talking about other various things like bringing the family back, not allowing attacks on the family, and Christianity, and all these sorts of things. Again, pretty centrist stuff. 20 years ago, this would have been considered very tame. Now it's viewed as or denounced as radical by the globalist controlled media. But even if you look at the government of Giorgia Meloni there in Italy, the steps they've taken to turn back the globalist tide and to follow through on the platform that they got elected on, the steps they've taken have been very timid so far. I mean, somebody please correct me if I'm wrong here, but the illegals are still arriving. Sure, they've been sent to a different port of entry, which knocks the globalist NGO, illegal ferry service out of action per ship for a few days and this sort of thing. But the tough talk about impounding the vessels and arresting the crew and all this sort of thing, that they're proceeding very slowly and very, very timid, certainly in my view. And I haven't seen any of the grand pronouncements they were making followed through on with anything other than, again, very timid moves. So if this is the big pushback, then it's almost a non-pushback. Now, contrast when a pro-globalist administration comes in, they hit the ground running. Their legislation comes pouring out, and they're appointing their activist buddies into all areas. They hit it hard and quickly, and they go. And if anyone gets in the way, they're denounced in the media, and they're unpersoned and so on. So they move quickly and with heavy hand, and they don't brook any opposition. No timidity from these guys. They go for it. So why is the other side so timid, or does nothing? I mean, were they telling lies during were they just saying, well, we've got to say these things. This is what the people want. We'll tell the people what they want to get elected, and then we'll just keep on implementing the globalist project. And there are probably advisors from the globalist cabal that say, look, there's only two major parties here. Either you win or they win. We control both of you. This is what you need to say to get elected. And if it doesn't work out, we've still got our globalist buddies in control. And if you win the election, then we've got you also our globalist buddies in control. So there's those elements of that. But I've noticed that even if the government is the new government coming in is unsympathetic to the globalist project, they still move with incredible timidity and crawl slowly along, unlike the other side, which goes wham and just hits it. So So there's a couple of things I want to sort of talk about here. What sort of control does the globalist cabal have over these politicians? Even politics. Some of the politicians I know personally are very anti-globalist, but they won't do anything to offend the globalists. You know, again, very timid, and if anything, will further the globalist project. So there's a few things. You know, there was in Australia some years ago, there was a centre-right government that was roundly denouncing the activism in universities, the activism in high schools, the NGO activism, how the NGOs, the United Nations, and the globalists were sort of conspiring to put activists into universities and all over the place. They were going to clamp down on this, and they were going to clamp down on that, and they were going to stop the mass migration, and they were going to change the migration law so only people that spoke very good English and had real skills could migrate to Australia. They were going to stop these illiterate peasants arriving, and they were talking tough. And they you know, one of the pronouncements by the guy was, you know, we will decide, you know, who comes to Australia and the manner in which they arrive, or words to that effect at least. And so the Australian voters responded and gave this government a very substantial majority in both houses of parliament, which is quite rare in Australia. It happens, but it's quite rare. And they did stop the illegal boat arrivals. That they did stop. You know, the people smuggler gig. But they massively increased the legal migration. So whereas they stopped, you know, 50,000 illegals arriving, they added, you know, 150,000 to the legal arrivals, and they increased the family reunification, or chain migration, as the Americans call it. So in the end, Australia was much worse off, and the standards for you have to speak good English and you have to have skills, that was lowered considerably, so that people that couldn't speak a word of English and had no skills whatsoever and were peasants from outback, you know, China or something, that were living, you know, subsistence existence. They were people being brought into Australia en masse. So, and various other things. You know, the government made almost no effort, other than a very token symbolic effort to stop the NGO activism in universities and NGO activists arriving in Australia and doing speaking tours and being given town halls for free, whereas anyone else has to pay. Similarly, you know, people who were demonstrating against some of these things were getting arrested, whereas people that were in favour of the globalist project can do whatever they want, and so on. So this is very much a thing where governments are reluctant to oppose the globalist project, no matter how firebrand their rhetoric was previously. And I wonder why that is. Why are they so cowardly and afraid once the levers of power come in? I mean, they could have been utterly duplicitous to begin with, and that's a possibility. But these are people that privately, again, some of them I know, privately they don't agree with this globalist project. Yet when they're in power, they support it thoroughly. Now, they're you know, whether corruption's a reason or something else, I don't know. But you know, I was looking at one of the senior politicians in charge of a very, very powerful, influential committee, and as soon as he took up that committee, he had two sons that were immediately given, you know, very, very well paid, prestigious jobs with a big international financial firm, for example. So, you know, to what extent was that an issue? Do they threaten to compromise you if you don't go along? Are there skeletons in the closet that they threaten to bring out and bring, you know, shame and humiliation to your family and so on? You know, these people are powerful enough to do it, and if they want to create a little, you know, a little frail little woman who says he tried to rape me, you know, they can do it. You know, they've got the means to do that, and so you had to be very careful. So maybe they get to these people. You just another point. There was a politician I knew that was fairly mildly really criticised one of the financial institutions in it's an international one, but they've got a big presence in Australia. And before he'd finished, he made the speech in the Parliament House, and he waited until some other speeches occurred. So not even 2 hours after he made the speech, within that time, he had a bunch of lobbyists waiting in his office by the time he got back, employed by that major financial institution. That's how quickly these people get to hear about these things, and how very slick and superbly well organized they are. They had a hit squad down in his office, again within 2 hours. That's from the moment that he finished the speech, for goodness sakes. So now thereafter, following that meeting, for some reason he did a complete about face. Not only did he never criticize them again, he started to praise them. Now, I don't know what they offered him or threatened him with, but you don't change your position that much, given that his speech was quite well put together and factual and so on. It wasn't just the ravings of a crazy, but suddenly he changed his position. Now, there was a government in Australia where I wouldn't say they were anti-globalist, but they did genuinely want to reduce migration, and they believed they actually represented the Australian voters, which is a no-no for the globalist cabal. You don't represent the voters, buddy. You represent us, and you do what the fuck you're told. And that's how the globalists are running all Western governments. But this government was it had a prime minister, and just a few of the key people were very lukewarm about the globalist project. They weren't really on board with the global warming stuff. They didn't like the mass immigration. They wanted to increase the standards so that you really did have to speak English and stop the family migration. They wanted to deport the illegals that were here and people that overstayed their visas, and they really tightened up the refugee thing. If you passed through a safe country to get to Australia, then you were not a refugee. And so they did some things which enraged the globalists, and you could tell by the way the globalist controlled media really turned on them and called them fascists and Nazis and so on. It didn't help that the Prime Minister was also a Christian, and espoused Christian values, and believed in the family and all this sort of stuff. They went after him big time on that. But in saying global warming, this particular Prime Minister wanted to stop the global warming stand. He just didn't want to give taxpayer money to the global, the alternative energy lobby, just to put in their pockets while really not doing much in return, which is how it is. Instead, he wanted to do things like build solar panels in Australia, for example. So put tariffs on the Chinese imports. He wanted to have programs to plant lots more trees to offset claims of carbon and these sorts of things. So I thought it was very practical and very realistic and very pro-Australia, but it enraged the globalists, absolutely drove them insane with rage. And to give you some idea how much power the globalists had, they were able to have this prime minister removed from an elected prime minister just removed from office and replaced with a pro-globalist, pro-global warming advocate. It's incredible they're able to do that, and that the parliamentarians, the elected representatives of the people, went along with this. There was no, there was no solid pushback and anything like that. They just went along with it, including the senior politicians as well, which I thought was staggering. As this prime minister made a couple of sort of silly little mistakes, I thought. And I don't think he handled it that well, and I don't think he realised the extent of the the globalist control of the people around him. But he seemed to be caught quite unawares, flat-footed. He almost looked surprised. Gee, how did this happen? And I thought he didn't really do himself any favours. But nonetheless, he was an elected representative of the people. And if they want to get rid of him, then they have an election. That was my view. But even under the pressure he was under to not oppose the globalist project, he did retreat and give ground and give concessions and tried to play the feminism card and things like that. So you could see him in retreat already, but he just didn't retreat far enough and fast enough to suit the globalists. And they have a very much, hey, we decide what goes on around here, buddy, not you. You may be elected by people. You may think you're in charge of a sovereign nation, but you're not. We're in charge. You do what the fuck you're told. And so they got rid of this guy, this elected representative. It's insane. But this is maybe why politicians seem very timid and reluctant to oppose the globalist project, because they know what's in store for them or what might happen if they don't follow instructions and so on. So is there any hope for the Western world? Is there any hope for any Western nation that there's a politician anywhere that can be found who's prepared to stand up to these people or is able to? You can get someone who's very rich, like a Donald Trump or something, where offering him a waterfront, house on the waterfront is, what's that going to achieve? He's already got enough money to make sure his kids have got great jobs and great incomes and so on. He doesn't need any more money, so they can't get to him that way. They can get to him through, saying that he raped this woman or that, which they've tried, of course, and they've gone after him on that. But that doesn't seem to have got anywhere, and they've certainly been desperate to gin it up as much as they can. But they were able to make, the entire media establishment went after him and harassed him, his family, his policies. His policies were being obstructed, and every activist, judge or lawyer was sort of called to bear arms against him, and did. So the entire infrastructure, unions, media, everything was opposing him every step of the way. And surprising he got anything done. Similarly, he should have known the extent of that opposition, or at least had a good idea. Because if you look at how timid his reforms were compared to, say, when Biden hit office, or Biden was installed by the globalists in office, they absolutely went for it 100%, whereas Trump, by comparison, was quite timid. So my take on this is the reason. Another example, by the way, is Boris Johnson, the Conservatives in the UK. Johnson was seen as a maverick, a gadfly. He was going to oppose the globalists. He was going to get rid of this mass migration. He wouldn't put up with illegal arrivals, and he was going to stop those silly universities from indoctrinating kids and that sort of thing. But not only did Johnson not do those things, he did the complete opposite of what people expected. Now, because he was presumed to be, by the voters, presumed to be someone who was going to deliver on Brexit and thus deliver on the fight against globalisation, he was given a massive majority in Parliament to implement those policies, and could easily have done so. But instead, he swung even more globalist than probably any administration since Tony Blair's government. Really, he's been a super pro-globalist stooge flunky, and still is today. And that's, no one expected that. So that's deceit, in my view. That's deceit on a grand scale. But it goes to show how difficult it is. Even politicians that say they're going to fight back don't, and the ones that even dare to fight back have massive forces arrayed against them, and it's easier for them to go along. And again, the amount of politicians that I'm aware of who've become incredibly rich. Well, when I say incredibly rich, they would have been worth a few $1 million when they exited Parliament, worth 30, 40, 50 million bucks, 60 million bucks, that sort of thing. And they've got these incredible real estate deals that are so good, no one else can ever achieve those sort of things, and incredible business deals. One politician made gazillions out of a company that went bankrupt only 3 weeks after making the deal, and he's walked away with a very tidy sum of money from that transaction. So the list goes on, and if you're a bit of a nobody, you know that you can't make money under your own steam or your own ingenuity or hard work. And someone says, look, do this little favor for us, and we'll give you a waterfront property, and we'll make sure your son has a great job. You go, oh, okay, yep, that sounds all right to me. All you got to do is vote this way. And I'm sure a lot of them do it. So the forces arrayed against or for on the side of the pushing the globalization project are vast, and they're all people in positions of power. Or able to create a ruckus, like masses of uni kids on the street or something. But everyone else, the people, the voters, have been utterly disenfranchised. And I don't think this is going to play out well. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.